Hello and welcome to our next episode of Watson Drops. Today we're back with Corey Godfrey, Superintendent of Littleton's Water Department, to talk about the status of his department's projects that will positively affect the town's water supply and our safety. Corey, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Kirby.
Corey, can you please give us an update on PFAS? First, are there any changes to the national or to the Massachusetts standards?
Yes, the US EPA, that's the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, they recently announced new health advisories for PFAS that are thousands of times lower than the already historically low Massachusetts drinking water standard of 20 parts per trillion that went into effect back in 2019. So, for example, one of the new health advisories for one of the PFAS compounds, known as PFOA, is 4 parts per quadrillion, which is far below what any laboratory can even detect. While health advisories are not exactly the same thing as drinking water standards, they are a strong indicator of what the drinking water standard will be. And EPA is saying that they'll be announcing the draft drinking water standard by the end of this calendar year, so really just a few months from now. Then that goes out to public comment, and there's a whole process there, but the rule would be likely finalized by the end of 2023. So what the water industry is expecting is that the new drinking water standard will likely be non-detect, which means that any detectable level of these specific PFAS compounds would be a violation of federal drinking water standards.
Corey, how about giving us a quick refresher on polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS? How has Littleton been addressing this forever contamination?
Yeah, the PFAS issue is one that we've been dealing with here in Littleton since we first detected it in our Spectacle Pond well back in 2019. And that was before the Massachusetts drinking water standard was even established. We had decided to voluntarily sample for it at that time because we knew it was an emerging contaminant of concern, and that our neighboring town of Air had discovered PFAS in their Spectacle Pond well. And those levels that they had detected were above the 20 part per trillion standard that DEP was considering at the time. So just as you mentioned, PFAS, it's an acronym for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, which is a group of over 7,000 different man-made chemicals, which all behave pretty similarly in the environment and in the human body. So some are considered more dangerous than others, but they all contain carbon fluoride bonds, which are the strongest chemical bond in nature. And that's really the characteristic that allows them to be persistent in the environment. They don't degrade like most other contaminants do. And as a result of that characteristic, they've spread all over the globe, and they can be detected in the blood of virtually every human being on the planet at this point. Some of the negative health effects that have been associated with exposure to PFAS include cancer, liver damage, decreased fertility, and increased risk of asthma and thyroid disease. But fortunately, due to the proactive approach we took back before the Massachusetts was even regulating PFAS, we've been able to keep the PFAS levels in Littleton drinking water below the 20 parts per trillion that Mass DEP determined was a level of concern a couple of years ago. And many of the big capital improvement projects that we have going on right now are really a direct result of the PFAS contamination.
So that's a great transition, Corey, to the first project that we're going to talk about in the water department, and that's the Whitcomb Avenue water treatment plant. Tell us a little bit more about where we are with that project.
Yeah, we began construction on the Whitcomb Ave water treatment plant last summer, so a little over a year ago, and it's still on track to be online by spring of 2023, which was the original schedule. So that's about another 6 months or so. But that's assuming there aren't any additional supply chain issues. So as I think most people know, for the past year or two, there's been some significant supply chain issues with all kinds of products, and that includes a lot of the components of the water treatment plant. So our fingers are crossed. We think we'll still be online in spring 2023, but you never know. But as a reminder, this treatment plant will be removing iron, manganese, and PFAS from our Whitcomb Ave wells and our Spectacle Pond well. The Whitcomb Ave wells we just replaced last year in anticipation of the new treatment plant. And like I said, the new treatment plant should be online in the spring, but the Spectacle Pond well won't be flowing through the treatment plant until the following winter. There'll still be significant work to do at that well to get that water pumping over to the Wickham.
We understand that a new water main was installed from Spec Pond all the way over to Whitcomb Avenue. Now, why this new main, and why didn't we just upgrade the Spec Pond facility to also deal with PFAS?
Yeah, it's a good question. The Spectacle Pond well is the one that has the PFAS levels higher than the state drinking water standard of 20 parts per trillion. But the treatment plant that currently exists at Spectacle Pond is about 25 years old and near the end of its useful life. Plus, it does not remove PFAS at all. So rather than replacing that treatment plant with a new one, as you mentioned, we installed a 3.5-mile long transmission main last summer to bring that water from the Spec Pond well to the Wickham Ave treatment plant. So this approach is much more economical in terms of both the initial construction costs as long as the long-term operational costs. As you can imagine, it's cheaper to operate one plant than two. So, this is especially in light of the fact that the new EPA health advisories mean that we will likely need to treat the Whitcomb Ave wells for PFAS as well, in the very near future, once those advisories become drinking water standards in a year or two. So because of that approach that we took there, we will already be doing that.
There recently was a celebration over at the Amazon distribution site. Can you please tell the viewers what it was or what has happened at location that has the water department so excited?
Yeah, the Taylor Street well site. So there was a test well installed there in 1986. The property at that time was owned by Digital. And then when Amazon moved into the property a year or two ago at 153 Taylor Street, 58 acres was donated to the water department, including the area where the test well was located. So we've recently done some testing of its capacity, which was very encouraging. And based on those results, we've begun the permitting process with Mass DEP to develop that new source of water supply. I expect that to go pretty smoothly, and we expect to begin engineering on the site next year with construction well soon after that. And that construction would include a transmission main from that well over to the new Wickham Ave treatment plant, which would significantly increase our available water supply. And that treatment plant was intentionally designed with extra capacity as we anticipated bringing a new source into it eventually.
Yeah, and that's really important as we've seen out west, the lakes and the reservoirs being extremely low, and people are being challenged to even survive, let alone do businesses or irrigate crops. Corey, we know your department's been doing some hard rock drilling up on Cobbs. Can you explain that project and some of the challenges that your team has faced, as well as any upcoming town meeting articles that regard or relate to this well site?
Yeah, a longer term project we've been working on to increase Littleton's available water supply is the Cobbs Well site near the Acton town line. So those bedrock wells were installed in 2017 and permitting has been ongoing ever since. It's a very complicated project with lots of legal and technical challenges, but it is an important one to make sure that Littleton continues to have enough water to supply itself into the future. We're planning on a spring town meeting vote to transfer control of some town-owned land to the water department and to amend some conservation restrictions there to allow development of a public water supply on the land.
Any news on the Cedar Hill storage tank? And what purpose does this tank serve in delivering water to the Littleton customers?
Yep, the Cedar Hill storage tank is located in the Long Lake neighborhood. It's our oldest water storage tank in town, and so it's about 72 years old right now. And its replacement is currently under construction immediately next door to the existing tank. So the new tank is expected to be complete early spring, after which point the old tank will be demolished and removed. Most of the tank's already installed. For anyone who drives by the area, you can take a look and see. The tank's really critical in maintaining water pressure, not just in the Long Lake neighborhood, but also in the Littleton Common area.
Shifting gears to the weather, is our community still in a drought situation? And how should residents respond? Is the watering ban still in effect for all outside use?
Yeah, as most people are aware, we've had a significant drought this past summer, one of the worst in decades. It's all over Massachusetts, not just in the Littleton area. But that resulted in some pretty strict outdoor watering restrictions to make sure that we had enough water to meet critical uses. You have to remember, until that Whitcomb Ave treatment plant is finished, our Spectacle Pond well, which is our largest producing well, is really operating at half capacity. So we're in a worse situation than we would have been otherwise with the drought. But fortunately, we've had a little more rain in the past few weeks and expect more in October, which is almost always a wet month. So I'm optimistic that things will turn around soon.
Folks don't have to worry about watering things outside, or are we still making certain that folks are paying attention to that?
Yeah, so technically there's still a water ban, although it's less of an issue as we come into the fall. People aren't generally irrigating in the fall. Irrigation is the main outdoor water use that we're looking to restrict during the drought. So it's a little bit less of a concern this time of year. Depending on how things go over the fall and the winter, it may or may not be a concern again next year. Hoping we get a lot of rain and a lot of snow to replenish the aquifer.
Can I quote you on that, Corey? Snow?
Sure.
I know that the water department goes through a seasonal process of hydrant flushing. Can you please explain what this is and the importance of doing this to town water and to town safety?
Sure. Yeah, we plan to begin flushing the water mains next week. That's the week of October 3rd. And this process uses a fair amount of water, but it's a critical component of proactive water system maintenance. Without adequate flushing, sediment builds up in the water mains and causes discolored water, which really impacts everyone. And also, since we use the fire hydrants to flush the water mains, it allows our department to ensure that the hydrants are working properly for the fire department.
Corey, thank you very much for coming with us today and explaining to the town of Littleton residents about these projects that are underway and the rationale behind some of them and timeframes. So again, we've been speaking with Littleton Water Department Superintendent Corey Godfrey, again, explaining status of his projects that will positively affect town's water supply and our safety. Thanks, Corey.
Thanks for having me, Kirby.